Listen up, people. You're headed for a
Welcome to day 10 of our daily broadcast here from the diplomatic zone in Glasgow. My name is Katarina Rolfsdotter Jansson and I'm hosting this with my colleague Nick Nuttall. And today is Sweden Business Day. We're going to talk about pioneering fossil-free solutions. And with us as our first guest, we have the Minister of Environment and Climate in Sweden, also the Deputy Prime Minister, Per Bolund. You have the floor, Per Bolund.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here. It's with great pride, of course, in such a great gathering. It has been said that future favors the bold, and I can tell you that we really need bold decisions here at COP26. So we'll have to hope that that is right. And I think that the speakers that we will hear from today at this meeting will really show that they have taken the bold decisions and that it has truly also favored them. So I think we can all learn from their experiences, and I hope this message also reaches all the delegates here at the COP26 meeting, because boldness is very much necessary at this time of age. So we are at a time when we need to take the decisions that are necessary, and of course we are the first generation in time that know the consequences of climate change. We've felt it, we know that it is really a climate crisis that we are entering at the moment, but we are also the last generation that can actually make a difference to actually do what is necessary to stop climate change. And for that reason, I'm so proud to be here and also to be able to make it possible for you to listen to leaders that have taken these steps, that have shown that it is possible to really do what is necessary to pioneer the way towards a fossil-free future. And that future is the future that we all need, and we have to make sure that so many others take these steps. So we can see here business leaders that have decided to move in one direction, and that is towards fossil-free practices and fossil-free businesses. But they haven't only taken the direction, they have also decided on taking action and starting to do what is necessary to reach that future. So this is, of course, good news. It is good news for all of us who are striving for a better future, a sustainable planet for us all. But it's also good news because they can show that it's not only good for us all, it's also good for their business models and for their profits. And that is something that I think the world really needs to hear. So we can see that if we are, as a global scale, to make this transition happen, we have to change focus. We can't speak no longer about burden sharing and about the difficult path ahead. We have to show that this actually is a path that will lead to greater prosperity and to greater health and to a better situation for us all. And these businesses that we will hear have really shown that that is possible. They have shown that that is the way that they are taking. So we have to change all the agenda that sometimes leads to hopelessness. When we know that there is such a challenge ahead, we also have to provide hope for all the people that need to take these decisions going forward. And especially I think about young people who really we have to show that there is a way forward, a way of hope. Not just hope for a planet they can live on in the future, but perhaps at the same time also hope of a better life and a better livelihood and a green job that they can go to every day and every day be part of the solution and making sure that their work also leads to a brighter future. And that kind of hope is what we actually can show and that we will hear more of today. So these leaders that we will hear from have also shown that they can take the harder steps, not just the easy ones, the steps that are necessary to make heavy industry part of a sustainable future, producing fossil-free steel, making sure that they can decarbonize our transportation systems to show that we can have a clean energy system that leads to industry processes that can really get rid of carbon. but also provide the tools to empower people, to show that a circular economy actually is possible in the days leading ahead. So it is, when I speak here, I actually feel a great deal of optimism. I characterize myself as a realistic optimist. I'm a realist because I know how much is needed to be done and how short time we have to do it. But I'm also increasingly an optimist, and especially among leaders like these that we will hear from, I tend to be more and more optimistic that actually the path ahead is not only possible, but we can also show that it's the path that is profitable for us all. And that really gives me hope, and I hope that is hope that also will spread throughout this conference, because we need hope in order to take the bold decisions that we need to take here at COP26. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to open up this. I have to continue with the negotiations, but I leave you in warm hands with our moderators. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak here.
Thank you very much, Minister Bolund. Thank you. As I mentioned, we're talking today about pioneering the possible and focusing on fossil-free solutions. But it's also important for us to get a little bit of information what's happening outside of the diplomatic zone. So on every broadcast, we have with us Anita Soine, who is our Green Zone reporter. Welcome up on stage, Anita. And give us a little bit of a flyover of what you've picked up so far on the COP.
Today we had a conversation of developing countries, and Kenya was among them. And the challenge that was highlighted when it comes to transitioning to clean energy was finance. So finance being the big issue, we thought that it is wise for already developed countries, which anyway contributed to much of the fossil fuels, to support developing countries so that we can all transition together, so that we are not left behind when other people who are able will be transitioning to clean energy. Another thing that was talked about was on respiratory diseases that are caused by sources of energy used by women to cook, that is firewood, charcoal, in some parts of Africa, where the second lady of the Republic of Kenya highlighted on how women are affected more. They are the ones who are in the kitchen every other time, and that most respiratory diseases are attributed to the non-clean sources of energy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anita. And you'll be back tomorrow for the last broadcast we have here. From We Don't Have Time.
Thank you.
And we bring you COP26 here. We call it the COP26 back door. And we also have hubs in Nairobi, Stockholm, and also in Washington, D.C. And we will be checking in with the hubs during the broadcast. So Nick Nuttall. Nick used to be the Director of Communications at the COP in Paris. And he's, we're always the dynamic duo, I hope at least. We're trying to be dynamic.
We try our best, yes.
And Nick, we have the counter here next to us.
Yes, exactly. Let me just mention that, because we've had this up every day. You know, the International Monetary Fund brought out a report just before the COP on the trillions of dollars that are being spent on subsidizing fossil fuels around the world. And we thought it'd be interesting to actually count down exactly how much money count up how much money has actually been spent on fossil fuel subsidies since the beginning of COP26. And it's totally eye-watering, isn't it? But what I just wanted to say was, it can be done. You can get out of fossil fuel subsidies. I did a bit of quick research today. At least 53 countries have reformed their fossil fuel subsidies between 2015 and 2020. Countries like Morocco, countries like Ghana, countries like India, and a country like Egypt, which has actually halved its fossil fuel subsidies in terms of its GDP over recent years. And the key thing that comes out is you have to have a dialogue with the public. You have to persuade the public that getting out of fossil fuels means that it's good for something else. And in the case of Egypt, they've been spending the money saved on healthcare, and the public has bought into that.
So Nick, there's a film connected to this campaign also. produced by UNDP. So
Exactly.
let's watch this video.
Yeah, we'd love to watch the UNDP video if the technicians could roll that.
Listen up, people. You're headed for a climate disaster. And yet every year, governments spend hundreds of billions of public funds on fossil fuel subsidies. Imagine if we had spent hundreds of billions per year subsidizing giant meteors. That's what you're doing right now. Around the world, people are living in poverty. Don't you think helping them would make more sense than, I don't know, paying for the demise of your entire species? You've got a huge opportunity right now as you rebuild your economies and bounce back from this pandemic. So here's my wild idea. Don't choose extinction. Save your species before it's too late. It's time for you humans to stop making excuses and start making changes. Thank you.
This is really such a wonderful campaign, so please share it. The hashtag is Don't Choose Extinction. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? Well, it's now my pleasure to introduce, here next to me in Glasgow, Emma Monér-Viking, who's Head of International Sustainable Business here at Business Sweden.
Thank you very much.
Emma, you've been here for quite a while now, just like we have. Would you please share with the audience here at the Swedish Pavilion, but also watching us online from all over the world, your main takeaways so far for what has happened here at the Business Sweden Hub?
Indeed, thank you very much. I think our Minister of Climate put it very well, actually. We are here to showcase how the transition is possible. We're all talking about how difficult it is and all the challenges we have ahead of us, and it's really important that we don't get stuck in that. So we have brought some of the most leading front-running companies from Sweden that have high climate commitments and sustainable solutions in place today, not tomorrow or in 2030, actually today, that can support other countries with their transformation. So we had brought the Swedish private sector, academia, NGOs, but also the public sector to show how the transformation is possible and how we can pioneer the possible and keep 1.5 alive. And I think my key takeaways are quite interesting in the sense that we have a private sector in Sweden that are requesting what the negotiations are now about. They want to see the Article 6 and the Paris Agreement to be concluded in the way that we can also transform and accelerate the green transformation. They want to see a tax on carbon, they want to see an emission trading system, they want to see global standards for regulations and measurements so that they can transform their commitments into real actions. And it's quite interesting, I would say, that we have a private sector that are requesting, to make it hard and also expensive to do business in order to transform and actually accelerate the green transition globally. So that is actually my key takeaways, and I think it's also an important message to politicians and world leaders out there that we have solutions in place, but we also need to create more incentives to drive the demand for sustainable solutions in order to accelerate the green transition and help other countries to transform.
Well, thank you very much, Emma Monér-Viking.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mentioned initially that we have hubs connecting into our studio, and I'm now turning to Washington, D.C., and we have a U.S. representative. It's actually the president of the U.S. operations, ready to give a keynote. And I'd like to give her quite extensive presentation here because she is a very key player for us that we don't have time, and also globally in climate action. So I'd like to introduce now Dr. Shruta Chakraborty. She is a globally recognized risk and behavioral scientist and an expert on global risks and ranging from climate change to COVID-19. She's a trusted authority on proactive preparedness to mitigate against the impacts of climate change, motivated by the need for clear, credible, evidence-based communication. She is regularly interviewed in global news like CNN and also on the BBC. And she is a book author from her time as a postdoc at Oxford University. Dr. Chakraborty is a TEDx and South by Southwest speaker, and she has been featured on Discovery Plus alongside Kamala Harris on the topic of climate and security. So let's see if we now can be joined by Dr. Shweta Chakraborty from our hub in Washington, D.C. Excellent. Well, the floor is yours, Shweta Chakraborty.
Yes, thank you very much for that kind introduction, Katarina. In addition to being the US president for We Don't Have Time, I'm also a behavioral scientist. That means I study why there is a gap between risk perceptions and risk reality on climate change and its many ripple effects. We know about these: increased infectious diseases, food security issues, human migration, and I advise on how to use communications to close that gap. This gap exists across all stakeholders. This is as broad as encompassing those who eat food, drink water, breathe air. So yes, all of us. But less facetiously, I speak to stakeholders across the public-private sector divide to communicate both internally and externally, to the end consumers, to the public, and to policymakers. There is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all communication strategy, and definitely no such thing as just presenting the numbers. Much of the mess we find ourselves in now is because of a failure in communications and a failure in consistent sector-wide collaboration that is entrenched in evidence and entrenched in data. And our priorities and policies from local to multilateral levels reflect that failure. We have the technology, and we have more in the pipeline. We have the science, and we have the human ingenuity to contribute our unique skill sets to confronting and overcoming this climate crisis. And yet we still find ourselves in this current conundrum. Well, let's start by all getting on the same page and identifying the key takeaways of what we can do as individuals who want to see a better planet for our children. Why has this been so hard? We have the technology to deploy, and we have so much in the pipeline. Much of the holdup is now political, and political will stems from constituency demands, or in this case, a lack of demand to prioritize the climate. So why is this? It seems so evident now that climate change is happening. What accounts for the resistance to the upfront adaptation mitigation efforts that will be needed to prevent even higher costs and worse catastrophes down the line? Well, the short answer is that it's our brains. Before we can navigate the policy landscape, we need to understand why there has been a resistance to take in the reality of the information I just presented to you, and how we can all play a role in overcoming the resistance in ourselves and in our networks. So let's start with behavioral science. It's the cross-disciplinary science of understanding the causes of individual, group, and organizational behavior across different levels. Behavioral science encompasses the social sciences. It brings together insights and methods from a variety of disciplines and fields like behavioral economics, organizational behavior, neuroscience, and others. Under the umbrella of behavioral science, these disciplines, which separately do not provide a complete picture of human behavior, offer a comprehensive understanding as to why humans behave the way they do, and how these behaviors are linked to perceptions as opposed to the actual statistics and the actual data. Once I convince you that it's our perceptions that drive our behaviors, it becomes easier to explain why climate change impacts are so easily overlooked. So let's start with how we are wired. Since the dawn of our species, our brains have been designed to react in certain ways to risks around us, particularly to overreact to those that are novel, unfamiliar, or have the potential for catastrophic consequences. And this has worked out well for us for the most part. Our ancestors would see a poisonous snake and immediately jumpstart the response to react and hopefully run away. There were cues in the environment that their brains would rapidly scan and process to assess the risk. For example, what is the color of the snake? What's its position and stance? Is there other animals around? Most of this processing and subsequent decision-making was subliminal and automated. That's a relief. Had our ancestors needed the time to really think through what they needed to do, the snake would have won, and we would likely not be here today. The risks we face now are starkly different from those of our ancestors, but the way our brains are wired are not. Even though we have more time today to process information about the risks we face, we still tend to make snap judgments. None of us are immune to this, not even those of us who study it. If we think about public outrage to actual risk, we can see how wrong we get it. We overestimate risks that actually aren't that serious, like plane crashes. And we underestimate serious risks, like casualties from increased heat. We think this won't happen to us. We're programmed to be overconfident. We're programmed to ignore serious but slow-moving or seemingly far away risks. This is how our brain wiring dictates our perceptions. We are influenced by triggers, such as whether or not we can see the risk to whether or not we trust who is communicating about it to us. It's also long been established that a failure to manage trust results in a failure to manage risk. Mapping perceptions has the potential to uncover and manage previously overlooked cognitive triggers, such as trust, which has been established to be of consequence in how communications are processed and interpreted. Robust findings from sociology describe how we even allow our political identities to influence our perceptions of risk. For example, those who identify as conservative in America are more likely to perceive lower risk of climate change. Pause and think about how bizarre this is for a second. Why should we be able to tell, based on someone's political identity, if they are more likely to take climate change seriously, or if they're more likely to wear a mask? Additionally, well-established triggers in the field of risk perception include how familiar a risk is, how voluntary exposure to the risk is, how sensational a risk is. I would love everybody here to try this. Try this example on your friends and families. Ask them, how many more people die each year from shark attacks versus radon gas, and see how many of your friends and family say shark attacks. The news loves covering these sensational but rare occurrences. Shark attacks kill in the single digits globally every year. Radon gas in America alone is the second leading cause of lung cancer and kills on average 20,000 Americans annually. Our brains are wired to perceive greater frequency and probability of events based on how easily we can recall them in our minds. So the slow but very real dangerous risk of increased heat waves, of rising sea level, actually our brains suggest to us are not such a big deal. Meantime, people are scared to get into the ocean because of sharks. It's fears that fuel our perceptions of risk and even the solutions to those risks, like accepting and adopting science and technology advancements, accepting managed retreat inland from vulnerable coastlines. We need to recognize and handle these perceptions compassionately. Because remember, we are universally hardwired to resist certain realities. And for certain demographics, facing the facts causes cognitive dissonance, or that uncomfortable feeling we get when we're presented with information that conflicts with our existing values, our existing beliefs, and maybe even our very identities. We need to understand what these existing views are in different groups we are communicating to before we even think about communicating, so we can reduce that cognitive dissonance they experience. So we need to understand which groups of people are perceiving what risk. Is it that the planet is warming, or the changes it means for us in the short term? How far off from the reality of the risk are different groups? How do we communicate effectively to close the perception and reality gap for ultimately better decision-making around the climate that's entrenched in the data, in the facts? The end goal here is to partner, to pool our expertise, our resources, our perspectives, and our creativity, to overhaul existing polluting systems and provide a choice landscape that makes it easier for people to better make decisions about their consumption, their choices in food, in energy, in garments, and so much more. Let's do this together. Let's do it with the We Don't Have Time app. Together, we are the solution to the climate crisis. Thank you for letting me present this keynote. It is now my absolute pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Tom Steyer. Tom Steyer is a successful investor, business leader, philanthropist, and activist who is fully committed to fighting the climate crisis. Tom founded and led Farallon Capital Management, a San Francisco-based hedge fund that pioneered the multi-strategy approach to investing before leaving to give his time, money, and energy to fighting progressive causes. Tom has mobilized grassroots efforts to win clean air laws and to force big tobacco to pay its share of the healthcare costs. Tom helped make California the largest jurisdiction in the world with 100% clean energy law and prevented big oil's effort to roll back California's climate protections. He worked to prevent the construction of a new gas-fired power plant in a community largely made up of immigrants, people of color, and low-income families. Tom is also the founder of Next Gen America, the largest youth voter engagement organization in American history, and co-founder of Beneficial State Bank, a triple bottom line community development bank focused holistically on justice and sustainability. Most recently, Tom was a Democratic presidential candidate and in 2020 served as co-chair for California Governor Newsom's Business and Jobs Recovery Task Force. He co-chaired Vice President Biden's Climate Engagement Advisory Council to help mobilize climate voters. Today, Tom is the co-executive chair of Galvanized Climate Solutions, a mission-driven investment platform solely focused on mobilizing and deploying the capital and expertise needed to accelerate important and equitable climate solutions. It is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Tom Steyer.
Thank you to We Don't Have Time for this invitation. It's a pleasure to speak with you all today. Over the past 10 days, we've heard some big commitments from governments, from lowering global methane emissions by 30% below 2020 levels to ending and reversing deforestation by 2030. And from the private sector, $130 trillion of assets under management in alignment with the Paris Agreement. But pledges are not actions. And this moment demands more than pledges and commitments to exploring solutions. We need specific, real-world actions in the short term. If we don't act urgently and quickly, catching up later won't work. That's just the math. There's an old phrase in investing: strategy is easy, execution is hard. Well, this COP represents the world's pivot to execution. After years focused on strategy, on studying and parameterizing the problem, on identifying pathways for change, we can now discern a fundamental shift to execution. We don't have the luxury of time anymore. Globally, we're currently emitting 42 gigatons of CO2 per year. If we continue to emit at that rate, our carbon budget, the amount of CO2 we can emit without reaching a change of 1.5 C, will expire in under 8 years. 8 years. While governments play an important role in establishing the framework for businesses to operate within, substantively reducing emissions and accelerating decarbonization will require significant private sector investment in climate solutions. It's estimated that globally, between now and 2050, we need to invest over $4 trillion per year in energy transition technologies to secure a livable future. Currently, we're investing just under $1 trillion a year, leaving more than a $3 trillion gap annually. No government and no company can close this gap alone. To mobilize the capital necessary to maintain a livable future will require everyone's participation. Earlier this year, I co-founded Galvanized Climate Solutions to do my part towards resolving our climate crisis. Galvanize aims to identify, accelerate, and scale companies that contribute meaningful solutions to securing a livable future. We are solely focused on mobilizing and deploying the capital and expertise needed to accelerate important and equitable climate solutions. At Galvanize, we recognize that building a better world requires deep collaboration across disciplines. This isn't just a policy question or a science question or an investment question. It's all of the above. That's why Galvanize aims to combine expertise in all those fields and more under one roof. And for real global systemic change, We believe this type of collaboration must happen all over the world, across industries and across sectors. Any vision for a sustainable future relies upon broad systems change. We need to transform every part of our societies, from how we farm and how we eat, to how we travel, and of course, how we generate electricity. For a crisis of this magnitude, inflexible thinking and marginal changes just don't cut the mustard. Over the past week, I've been deeply inspired by the creative ideas I've heard from entrepreneurs, from leaders, and from activists across the globe. We need that kind of innovative strategy applied at scale to protect the people of this planet from unimaginable human suffering. We can't transform the world without a comprehensive approach from day one. It's not enough for the countries developing new climate solutions to deploy their tech at home while propping up the fossil fuel industry abroad. The rich countries who grew their economies with fossil fuels now must enable widespread technology transfers all over the world. Justice requires us to work to remediate the harm we've caused. But the good news is that the resulting work, the rebuilding of systems in a sustainable way, provides a massive business opportunity. But even when we're talking about purely private investment in climate solutions, I don't believe status quo capitalism will get us to where we want to be. At Galvanized, we believe in what I call movement capitalism, or the use of innovation, entrepreneurship, and competition to successfully support global movements. We believe if you harness the strengths of capitalism for good, you don't have to choose between solving societal problems, making a profit, and building a better world. You can do it all. But for the private sector to invest eventually, to pledge eventually, doesn't work. And companies can't rely on offsets or sequestration. They need to invest right now in decarbonization to actually reduce emissions. Because the climate crisis isn't just looming on the horizon, it's here. We have to act now, and we have to act urgently if we want to prevail. By recognizing the threat, by embracing collective action, and by thinking creatively, we will win. And saying that doesn't mean I'm an unrealistic, head in the clouds optimist. I know when it comes to climate that winning slowly is the same as losing. Every day, every week, every month we delay has a potentially deadly human cost. I know that. But I also know that we still have a viable path to a safe and healthy future. A future without the human suffering that our climate crisis threatens, the droughts, the hurricanes, the refugees. I believe that we will triumph because I always bet on the ingenuity, strength, and resilience of the human spirit. Nobody's computer model includes the impact of ideas that no one's come up with yet, of organizations and companies that don't exist, of alliances yet to be formed, of tech yet to be discovered. As threatening as the science is, the power of human creativity and collective will in fact galvanize the climate solutions we all need. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to be able to connect back with Shota Chakraborty here, but let's just give her warm thanks for her fantastic keynote presentation and also the very strong keynote presentation from Tom Steyer. Speaking of messages and conveying strong messages, let's now listen to some messages recorded by the UNDP.
Dear world leaders, we are all in danger from a deadly threat that could wreak havoc on our world. There are those that are trying to warn us, but we carry on as if nothing has happened. Meanwhile, while we keep fighting, people on the front lines are suffering. Dear world leaders, this is not fiction. This is real. The climate crisis is here and there are no magic solutions to it. What we need is for you to lead us into the future with courageous leadership, ambitious policies, and unflinching solidarity.
now my pleasure to introduce next to me here on stage Ingmar Rensog, CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time. Hello, Ingmar.
Hello, Katarina.
Please tell the audience watching globally and also here in the studio, the Swedish Pavilion, about the app and the activity on the app.
Yes, I do this very quickly. The We Don't Have Time app is a review platform where you can highlight solutions and problem. We want more solutions and less problem. So if you see something that you don't like, you could give a business, a governmental, political leader a climate warning. So they will stop doing that because people don't like to receive warnings that will influence their rating, and no one wants a bad rating. And I would like to give a climate warning to the people that are not fixing that number. We need to bring the fossil fuel subsidies down. But today I have really great news actually, and it's about love. Today is a big day and give me a lot of hope because we have been here all day, almost all night. At least we're the last one standing when they closed down here.
They almost throw us
and
out.
We have been really talking a lot about those subsidies. We're talking about 167 billion in sponsoring the fossil fuel industry. And that's an amount that has built up since the start of this meeting. We need to end those because the pledges will mean nothing if we on the same time give money to the problem we want to stop. And today is a big day because the fossil fuel subsidized phase out has made it into the draft text here at COP26. We will see what happens. There's a lot of countries that don't like it, but I would like to give a climate love to COP26 for having that text in the agreement draft. I hope it will hold to them.
Well, thank you, Ingmar. This is extremely hopeful. We now are going to move into the next segment called Transformers, and we have some great speakers lined up. And with us here in Glasgow to talk about the transformation of Volvo Group is Martin Lundstedt, who is CEO and President of Volvo Group. So please join me here on stage, Martin. And you have the floor to give a keynote presentation, and then I have some questions lined up for you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Great to be here. Nice to be here. Nice to be here again. And this is actually our last opportunity to speak at this meeting, so it's a great moment for us. I'm an optimistic guy, and actually more optimistic after this meeting because tomorrow afternoon, when I'm coming home, I will start to report back to my team what some of the findings have been. And when I talk about my team, of course, I talk about my 100,000 colleagues in the Volvo Group that are actually, driving the shift when it comes to trucks, buses, coaches, construction equipment, and many of these sectors that have a great opportunity to transform, but also report back to my other very important team that are my two daughters and my wife that are super interested in what is happening here. And one thing that is coming to my mind when I think about it is that we are talking much more about deploying at scale now. Finally, and that makes me very optimistic, as I said. COP21 still alive, Paris still alive, 1.5 degrees still alive, but deployment must accelerate considerably. I've been participating in quite a number of panels, and as I said, I think very fruitful, tangible. Some initiatives that we have been participating for a while, but also there we see progress being made. And I always start by saying that logistics is super important for driving prosperity, as a matter of fact. I mean, prosperity as we know it. and probably also as we knew it when it comes to the two-dimensional part of logistics. I mean, financial metrics, GDP development, and logistics are closely connected, but also social inclusion, if you think about it, also in the platform where we are competing today, not at least when it comes to a well-functioning public transport system, for example. I had a discussion today with a number of colleagues in our industry, but also in other industries, because this is a horizontal transition. And we have also had a discussion about the importance of logistics becoming so tangible during the pandemic. I remember in March 2020, standing at the head office in Gothenburg, and we have a pretty good view there, by coincidence, where you see actually the port, but you see a big part of Gothenburg, and it was completely empty. And it was not only scary because it was empty, but we were a little bit scared, and rightly so. But when I did see from that window how the Stena Line ferry actually were heading towards Denmark again, that gave some sort of, sign of hope that we are connected and transport are rolling again. And it became so clear to me about the frontline heroes, drivers and operators when it comes to ships, etc., and the importance of that. So logistics is important, but we also know that it needs to be considerably more sustainable, because logistics will continue to increase. That is a matter of fact. The world trends are speaking in that direction. Increasing population, increased urbanization, trade, we know, is also driving welfare. E-commerce, that has a big, actually, equation to be solved, since the main driver today is growth, and thereby we need also to continue to see that everything of those trends needs to be considerably more sustainable. And how should we do it then? I mean, we are firm believers in the Volvo Group, of course, of the Paris Agreement. 1.5 degrees, net zero 2050. Our products are at least lasting 10 years, right? Meaning that everything must be shipped 2040 is fossil-free globally. And we are in 190 countries. We are very proud of that. Even if we are a Swedish corporation, 2% of our top line is in Sweden. And we have pretty strong market share in Sweden, but Sweden is small. We are 10 million people. So we are relying on exports and cooperation, and we have R&D and production and sales in 190 countries. We are very proud of that. So 2040, fossil-free globally, means that already 2030 in many of the segments and geographies where we're operating, we almost need to be at a 100% conversion. In some of the segments, by the way, because the average is the mother of nothing. So a lot of the different segments will actually transform at scale already now. Distribution segments in cities, waste collection, you have port terminals, etc. Compact machines for buildings, only the noise reduction will be immense, etc. So you will see segment by segment and sector by sector transforming, and that's good news. The other very important element for the heavy-duty side is that we are B2B. We are business to business, and thereby we are talking with our customers as a business case, right? It is about TCO, it is about life cycle revenues for our customers. And in that regard, I will have the time here, otherwise I will talk forever. But in that regard, we can also have a very good conversation about how the P&L will actually look like before, at the brown platform, if I may say so, the diesel platform, and into the future with the green platform. One key element of that is, of course, price on carbon. The more we are incorporating the price on carbon on a public scale, regions, countries, cities, what have you, but also corporate scale. And what is very positive to see is that more and more corporations are actually incorporating price on carbon as a very important part of your decisions. Because you know that many of your decisions will last not only 1 or 2 years, but many years. And then you don't want to sit with an asset that might be a stranded asset in like 3 or 4 or 5 years. If we talk about that then, how will it look like in 2030? We don't know, but we know that the transformation will be big enough to actually have a meaningful, so to speak, footprint about everything. And therefore, I mean, when we look at our science-based targets, we have said minus 40% per ton kilometer globally in average. But again, as I said, the S-curves. That is a big undertaking, but the good news is that when we come to that level, then a lot of things will happen. Because then we have needed to really go in parallel with a different type of changes that are needed in this conversion. Because you have heard me and many others talking about, yes, the equipment, but we also need to have the charging infrastructure, we need to have the grid, we need to have the green generation of energy, etc. But the science-based targets for me is super important. And why is it so? First and foremost, because what we hope for at COP26 is not only that we have these good conversations, but also tangible results on the policy arena regarding 2025 and 2030. And that is the same with the science-based targets. It's forcing us to pull our plans more tangible here and now, right? And the good news, what we have learned when we have installed that also in Volvo, is actually that our scope 3 downstream, 92% of our total scope is actually products in use over the life cycle, or someone else's scope 2 or scope 3 upstreams, right? And the coolest part of being in logistics is that we are midst of everything. You have heard everyone talking about their abatement curves, and everyone is coming to logistics. So if you want to be part of the real impact, join Volvo. You will love it. I mean, the conversation, and you know, I'm blessed to be in an industry where we can make a real impact. When we are sitting and talking to each other or to our customers or customers' customers, we can say, if we do this, we will do it better here and now. We are in production. What will happen? What is the why? Or how to do this? Yeah, battery electric vehicles. We are in serial production 2019 on the medium duty range. Now we are accelerating up to the heavy duty range. That will be for a number of very prominent segments. We see that with the current execution we have now and are launching next year, we are covering 50% of the hauling operation in Europe. We have 1.5 million connected units, so we can follow that together with our customers by route optimization, etc. In addition to that, we're investing heavily in fuel cells, hydrogen. We are partnering with Daimler Truck, that is the two biggest builders of trucks, building hydrogen or fuel cells. And the reason for that is simple. Of course, to get quicker to scale, to ramp it up, but also to send the signal to the world that it's better that we shape up and invest also in the hydrogen infrastructure together. So it's a very strong signal. And number 3, also in certain regions and segments, we need to be realistic also that on renewable energy, the IC, the internal combustion engine, might also be needed beyond that. So we are not searching for the silver bullet. The big majority will be battery electric, fuel cell electric. And in order to get there, we always talk about, partnership is the new leadership. And why is it so? Because if you think about it, we have an extreme tough competition today in most of the markets when it comes to trucks, but also buses, etc. But all these competitors are competing on the brown platform. And we have done wonders on that brown platform, right? We have done incremental improvements of quality, of durability, of life length, of energy efficiency, of gross weight combination, but it's still incremental. Now it's time to do the disruptive change from a brown platform where we all compete intensively up to a green platform where we can continue to compete intensively. And there a new form of cooperation is needed, right? Where we are talking about the standards for charging, the charging in itself, the green generation of energy, the grid capacity, build confidence. To build confidence downstream with the transporters, but also with the transport buyers. We are transforming our own logistical system. We are one of the biggest transport buyers ourselves. So partnership is the new leadership. I talked about the Daimler Volvo partnership in fuel cell and hydrogen. And we have the pan-European charging infrastructure led through Volvo Energy together with Traton and Daimler to really deploy at scale now charging infrastructure for heavy duty. Huge interest once we are getting moving. Financial investors, upstream and downstream partners that would like to participate. If we can deploy it at scale, we will succeed. And SSAB, LKAB, Vattenfall, the first fossil-free steel vehicle and mining hauler out of all. So we are really doing it circular also because we'll come back to LKAB and operate autonomous, electric, fossil-free. What have we more? CampX. We have a setup how we innovate with small startups, but also smaller companies, etc., etc. I know, Katarina, I will be short. From policy, what do we really need here? We need consistency over time. Just a number of things. Price on carbon. If we could get the global price on carbon, we would love it. We know that it will be a hard bet, but anything in that direction will do it. And also that we are making a global call for corporations to include a price on carbon. Infra and grid we have talked about, green generation of energy at scale, working together on that. Storage capacity obviously, and that's the reason why hydrogen will be so important. Sustainability efficiencies that we are allowed to cooperate peer-to-peer in order to create a green platform, continue to compete on the rest. Permissions. So, perform to transform, and transform to perform in the future. That is our mantra. So, what is my conclusions? What is my report back to my two daughters and to my 100,000 colleagues? Logistics is key to drive prosperity, but also to drive the sustainability agenda. Accelerate. And what is acceleration? That is, to put it more simple, speed up the speed. Think about it, speed up the speed. The speed is a little bit too slow now. The era of silos is over. We need to cooperate, and we are into B2B sector where we really know everyone else in the value chain, so we can do it. Partnership is the new leadership, and together we can shape the world that we want to live in. That will be the report back. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Martin. You actually answered most of my questions already, because that was a great presentation. But I do have a question about cost, because people might think, well, this hydrogen, well, this green steel is going to be so much more costly in the vehicles and the trucks that you're now putting to the market. But this is not really the case, is it?
No, first and foremost, I mean, when you look at the different parts of the vehicle, you need to take it step by step. I mean, today we might talk about, a couple of $100 maybe. Depends on what type of execution we're talking about. And then, but then of course we need to be realistic that it will be not only steel, it's aluminium, it's batteries, etc. So we need to be realistic. But the good news is that we are just at the start here. So when we are moving into this, of course, step by step, we will get all the scale advantages that we have seen. And again, price on carbon. And that's the reason also why we always talk about the social inclusion. Moving from a brown to a green platform can not only happen by increasing, but the price of carbon, for example, can be used also to redistribute, so that we have an inclusive, so to speak, transition. But when you look at it, we are very optimistic to reach, what we call the life cycle revenues and the P&L for that transition, because it's a profit and loss in the B2B. And customers, they're also ready to pay a certain premium to get there, because when they look at the abatement curve and realize that logistics is a very good bet to really move into fossil-free, to get rid of very much of their CO2, to a pretty reasonable investment, actually.
Well, thank you very much for shedding light on this question and for your keynote presentation.
Thank you very much, and it's been great to be here.
Excellent. And say hello to your wife and your two daughters.
I will do that.
It's wonderful.
And to all the colleagues also.
Of course, all the colleagues.
Take care.
Thank you very much, Martin. So, Let's now move on to an interview, and it's an interview with Madeleine Gilborn. She's Vice President of Clean Technologies, and she's talking together with Katarina Paulsson, who's Vice President of Sustainability at Alfa Laval. And this is a recorded interview, so just sit back and enjoy.
So, why are you here at COP26?
Because we need to accelerate the transition to net zero. And we as Alfa Laval is here because we believe that we have solutions available already today to accelerate the transition, and we want to make those solutions visible for policymakers. And the second part is that we believe that partnerships and working across sectors will be one of the key aspects for making this transition happen. And being here at COP is a way for us to seek those type of partnerships. But on the other way as well is that it's so important for us to understand and learn from the companies that are here about what are their challenges and how can we enable that transition, how can we support.
For those people that don't know Alfa Laval so well, a Swedish company, what do you actually make? What is it that you actually do as a company?
Yes, so we are a technology company. We have three main technologies. We do heat transfer, separation and fluid handling. But the key is that these are part of the solution, both for decarbonization right now and right here, but also to enable the transition, both to clean energy and to circular economy. So if I take it as an example, the first one is that energy efficiency, for example, is one of the key enablers to reaching the goals of the Paris Agreement. Because we often forget that a kilowatt of saved energy is equally important to a kilowatt of produced clean energy. And these are technologies that are available today. So our heat exchangers are, for example, 20 to 50% more efficient than traditional technologies. It means that we save every year energy equivalent to heat 10 million homes in Europe. So it's a lot of energy. And similar, our technologies are used for the clean energy transition to make those sort of affordable and commercialized. So we're working on, for example, green hydrogen, fuel cells and energy storage. And one of the things we will launch here at COP is actually today a long-duration energy storage council led by CEOs among one of the biggest companies in the world, from energy companies, investors, and also engineering firms. And the objective we have is to innovate and deploy energy storage technologies to enable net zero grid by 2040.
Amazing. Now, I have your colleague here. Let's talk about decarbonization. Let's talk about how you decarbonize to achieve, firstly, a halving of emissions, and then to achieve net zero by 2050. What are you up to?
Well, as you can see here in the picture, we have a target of reaching carbon neutrality by 2030. So we're working to reach zero, scope 1 and 2. But then we are also going to ensure that scope 3 we reduce to half by 2030. Then you ask the question about 2050, of course, and that becomes a challenge because then it's zero, right? It's zero for all of us. And that means that the hard-to-abate industries like steel, titanium, transport become part of our scope 3, which in essence means if they don't decarbonize, we're not going to reach our target either. So we're quite interdependent of each other, and I think that's what really COP is quite interesting, that it's here we really find ourselves being in the dependency and learning what we all need to do to help each other decarbonize. And as a matter of fact, as Madeleine said, our technologies are also used in the decarbonization of the hard-to-abate industries. So it is really an interrelationship. And I think the challenge here is just to make sure that we are able to mobilize quickly.
Great interview. Let's now move to our hub in Stockholm. And it's my pleasure to introduce David Olsson, who is co-founder of We Don't Have Time. And I'll be handing over to David for him to moderate the next conversations here and also to introduce an interview, pre-recorded interview. So over to you, David, in Stockholm.
Thank you, Katarina. It's a pleasure to follow these conversations, very important conversations from Glasgow. We are seeing so much ambition and climate insight, frankly, from these companies and speakers represented here.
Indeed.
And I love that quote, the era of silos is over. I do hope that is true. We at We Don't Have Time try to be the silo breaker, at least. So with me here is Anders Langvort. He is head group of sustainability at Nordea Bank. Anders holds a seat in the banking board of the United Nations Environment Programme Finance Initiative, and he has founded Bankers for Climate, an independent non-profit climate organization for the global financial industry. And Anders, you are also a senior advisor to the think tank Global Challenge, a Swedish think tank. So I will now give you the opportunity to give your keynote, and then we'll have a little Q&A. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And thank you for taking time and tuning in. Since we have a global audience today, just a very short company description of what is Nordea. We are the largest bank in the Nordic region. We are a full service provider for household customers, SMEs, corporates and institutions. And we have been a front runner on sustainability for many years. But if we look at the why is sustainability so important for the financial sector, for Nordea? Well, we all know from the discussions that we are having these weeks that the world needs to change. We need to transition into a low carbon economy. That is for sure. And if you think of it, the financial sector, we are in the very middle of everything. We invest in and we provide lending to all sectors. And we are also by nature a global creature. So our decisions on how we want to channel investments or financing, those decisions, they will have an impact all over the world. So that is our contribution on how we can drive towards society's goals, such as the Paris Climate Agreement, also the UN Sustainable Development Goals. But it's not enough, of course, with the financial sector. We need to work full force on all fronts in society. That is collaboration. It's doing this together. And on the note of together, I was fortunate enough to spend last week in Glasgow. Many good talks on collaboration. And if I look back a little bit at when we met in COP in Morocco in 2016, the corporate world, we were there, but perhaps not very forward-leaning, to be honest. When we look at COP26 in Madrid, when we met in 2019, we could see a clear ramp up for the corporate world. We were there, we were engaging, very, very good. But at the same time, not very tangible commitments, not very tangible promises. However, now in Glasgow, I can see a clear difference. It's a significant difference on the determination from the financial sector, from other industries. The true leaders, the real decision makers are now, they're active. They're taking part of the discussion. We just now listened to the CEO of Volvo Group, one of the largest corporates in the world. We could last week see the commitments from the Glasgow Financial Alliance, where 400 companies, financial companies across the world, jointly committed to net zero objectives. Combined, these companies, they have assets on $130 trillion US. That is a lot of zeros and a lot of money. And we need that kind of channeling of the money towards the society's goals again. And also, we could see so much engagement from our top chief executives. Last week, we had discussions and panels with Nordea's own CEO, with Standard Chartered CEO, the chairman of BBVA, the CEO of Citibank, one of the largest banks in the world, the CEO of BlackRock. We could all see them in panels in relation to COP. And that determination, what it does, it sends signals to the entire financial sector that trickles down into these organizations, and it will create accelerated speed. And all these commitments, the collaborations, the target settings that we see more from nations, from other sectors, that is what will bring us forward. So moving in a little bit more then on the how, what can the financial sector do? Well, first off, we can support our customers. We can enable them through products and, well, services, advisory, That is our main tool to channel investments into more sustainable solutions. I'm talking about sustainability funds. I'm talking about green corporate loans, sustainability bonds, green mortgages, green car loans, green deposit loans. That's the focus that we really need to channel capital. One of the biggest obligations that we have in the sector. Secondly, I would say that how we steer through policies, through guidelines, we steer through target setting. This could be specific policies on climate. It can be specific policies on certain sectors like forestry, shipping. It can be on fossil. It can be about setting very clear plans on how and when to phase out coal. That kind of clarity we need to bring to the table. Third, I would say, you have heard many people talk about this. It is about collaboration. We focus so much on joining forces together with other banks, with other investors across the world. Because when we come as one investor, we might have a lot of money and power. If we come as 100, we have true power, we have true impact. So quick on a few examples on what we have done. Nordea, we have set a net zero target for 2050 at the latest. And we were also one of the first banks in the world to set the more intermediate targets of reducing our carbon emissions from the investments and lending portfolios with 40 to 50% by 2030. I think setting targets first, that is true leadership. We have been part of founding the overarching framework, the Principles for Responsible Banking, which also then has led to many alliances. Again, alliances when the sector comes together. I could come with many examples, but I know that time is running away a little bit from me now. So I would like to wrap up with lending the words from Al Gore, true champion, one of my absolutely personal favorites. He says that we are in a sustainability revolution which has the magnitude of the industrial revolution and the speed of the digital. So like we said in Madrid, the official credo was time for action. I would say now it is time for accelerated action. We are in this together. By setting targets, by setting tangible action plans, we will also succeed together. I could simply end with, we don't have time for anything else.
Thank you, Anders. Thank you for a very good keynote. Well, you're one of the pioneers, and today is a conversation about pioneering fossil-free solutions, and you're also part of the finance sector. So my question is, what parts of the finance sector aren't as pioneering as you and Nordea?
Well, I think if we look at the focus that comes from the Nordic region and Europe, the focus is good and it's increasing a lot. The Nordic region, combined with a few Dutch and other European banks, are the leaders. And we need to see the same kind of commitments and clarity on target setting from all the regions in the world, from the largest banks and investors in Asia, Africa, Latin America, US. The US banks, they have really started to kind of run a lot faster the last 2 years, which is extremely good because they are also setting a bit of signals to the rest of the world. So it will never be enough if a few in the banking world does this good. We need to do it together, all of us.
And you mentioned that you are aiming towards 40 to 50% reduction fossil-free of fossil-free assets by 2030, if I understood you correctly. So what's happening now? Are you going to throw out some investments or assets in the near future, or how are you working towards that goal?
It is a carbon reduction emissions on the total portfolio, so the entire portfolio, not just certain sectors. But of course, as you indicate, some sectors might need to reduce more, whilst others won't. And for us, mainly about engaging either as an owner, if we are an investor, or our customers, the one we finance, to do this together with them, to set credible and tangible transition plans to shift towards this. So it's, in that sense, absolutely not about throwing customers out, because we don't think that is part of the solution. If we have energy companies today, the world needs energy. If they can transition and change the source of energy and go along, so we are on the track towards the Paris Climate Agreement, we are targeting 1.5 degrees, then we think it's good. If we don't see any change, well, of course, then we need to look into this very carefully. And as I said, coal, other things, there we need to see very clear phase-out plans.
Okay, thank you, Anders.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's now my pleasure to introduce the next keynote here from Stockholm. It's Victoria Karsberg, your head of corporate identity and group communications at SSAB. And Victoria has been involved in SSAB's transformation towards fossil-free steel and the hybrid initiative from the very beginning. She has a background as a journalist and communications consultant before she joined the steel industry. She has since then held top management positions within communications, brand, and marketing. So there you go, Victoria. Varsågod. Give your keynote.
Thank you so much, David, for that introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, to me and many others, COP26 is hope. Hope that the world leaders now seem to be more aware than ever that bold decisions are needed and will actually deliver on them. We need bold decisions on carbon pricing and on frameworks to build markets for fossil-free products for faster change. Because frankly, as the previous speaker said, we don't have time. So thank you so much for this opportunity to speak at this meeting, for pioneering fossil-free solutions, and thank you to We Don't Have Time for organizing this event. It is possible and necessary to transform the steel industry. The steel industry today stands for 7% of the CO2 emissions globally. This cannot go on. We need to change. We are developing a new breakthrough technology that will allow us to get rid of CO2 emissions in the steel production. We have proven the technology in pilot scale and already delivered the world's first fossil-free steel to our customer, Volvo Group. This was possible thanks to the cooperation with our partners LKAB and Vattenfall in the Hybrid Initiative. We have proven that the fossil-free value chain from the mine through the steel to the end customer is possible. It is clear that we need to work together to solve common challenges. SSAB has decided to be the first steel company in the world to offer fossil-free steel to the market in just a few years, and to gradually reduce our emissions to be a fossil-free company no later than 2045. Pioneering companies have an important role to play to turn the impossible into possible paths to take. We must allow for innovations to be commercialized and allow for pioneers to succeed. That's how we can inspire others to follow and make change happen. SSAB will move away from coal and fossil fuels and instead use fossil-free electricity, hydrogen, and biocarbon. But to make the change happen, we need bold decisions at COP26 and in the coming years. SSAB believes it must cost more to emit. The world needs strong carbon pricing instruments that makes the case for transition. We need policy frameworks that creates a global level playing field and supports companies that are developing breakthrough technologies and show the way. We are facing a completely new landscape with a lot of unknowns, but this cannot stop us. Breakthrough innovation is happening, fossil-free technologies are here. And we have a responsibility to nurture these technologies, make them possible to bring to market, and allow for change to happen. Just a few days ago, the First Movers Coalition was launched in Glasgow by the US State Department and World Economic Forum. SSAB is the only steel company joining the coalition. Secretary John Kerry then talked about the need for pioneers who dare to show the way so that others can follow. That is how we are able to scale the impact so that we can reach the 1.5-degree target that was set at the Paris Agreement. These types of initiatives, like the First Movers Coalition, are very important, both because companies commit themselves, but also because it puts pressure on decision makers to take the tough decisions. Many came to Glasgow with low expectations, but I believe that there is hope. There are signs that the world leaders now see the importance of a price on carbon and that there is a willingness to change. That is my hope for the last days of negotiations.
Thank you, Victoria, for your keynote. And now to round off this little session from the Stockholm hub, I will introduce a pre-recorded interview with Christian Levine. He is CEO and the president of Scania and member of the executive board of Traton SE. Christian Levine joined Scania in 1994 and he holds a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering. He has held several management positions in the company, including managing director of Scania Italy and Scania Switzerland. He's been head of sales of marketing and chief operating officer at Traton Group. Christian has been a member of the executive board of Traton SE since January 1994. And you will hear Christian address the following question. Is the transportation sector ready for the shift away from fossil fuel vehicles?
So I'm here with Christian Levine, who is the CEO of Scania, one of the world's great trucks and bus manufacturers operating in something like 100 countries around the world. We're here at COP26, and I wanted to ask you, Christian, so are you ready for the decarbonisation of the transportation sector?
The simple answer is yes. And we answer in many different ways, but the one that people probably are most excited about is that we actually now bring heavy commercial vehicles fully electrified, so zero tailpipe emission, to the market. We just brought our first truck model last year, we're bringing in another one this year, and then we're going to continue to bring in battery electric heavy vehicles, one new model all the way up until 2030. On top of that, of course, we need to handle the rolling population, and the combustion engines are there. So even if we reach our very ambitious targets to reach 50% BEV sales in 2030, still 90% of all heavy commercial vehicles in the world will be with a combustion engine. So we need to address that too. And that we're doing by promoting alternative fuels. So anything goes, HVO, biodiesel, biogas, compressed gas, liquefied gas, and these are the two roads that lead to a complete decarbonization of the transport industry. And I think it's important that we work on both.
If we had the 190 plus countries lined up here in the Swedish Pavilion, and you could ask them one question or you could ask one thing of them before the end of this COP26 or shortly afterwards, what would it be?
Let's put a price on carbon and let's increase it fast and gradual, and let's tell everyone how it's going to be done, because then we can certainly change much faster than with today's waiting, seeing, guessing, discussing. So price on carbon, that's the solution to at least our sector's decarbonization journey acceleration.
Maybe a supplementary question to that, because a couple of weeks ago, the International Monetary Fund brought out a report with a staggering several $1 trillion worth of money being spent on subsidizing fossil fuels. They call it implicit and explicit subsidies. And the We Don't Have Time team, we're broadcasting every night, we have a counter that shows how much has been spent on fossil fuels since the COP started. And last night I think was well over 100 billion since COP started. Would that be part of the package of measures that would also help level the playing field with electricity from renewables and things like that?
No, absolutely. You know, our customers, they don't buy a truck because they like to have one. You know, it's not consumer goods. It's an investment into a transportation system, and you want return on investment. So the total cost to run the vehicle is very, very determining for the purchase decision. Hence, we need to create, as you say, a level playing field where the battery electric vehicle or the hydrogen vehicle can actually compete total cost of ownership wise towards the fossil propelled one. And today, that is simply not the case. It is simply more expensive to run the battery electric. And too few people run transport, you know, as charity. And I guess that will not change. So to stop these insane subsidies and rather put that money into battery electric vehicles or hydrogen vehicles or other clean tech vehicles, that would also be a fantastic thing to transform our sector.
So governments start getting out of fossil fuel subsidies, put a good price on carbon, make it stable, and we've got the beginning of a revolution that can go even faster than it is right now.
Technology is ready.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
It was my pleasure. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Stockholm, and thank you for the praise from the speakers in Stockholm too. We don't have time, but I'd like to point out that this event here is indeed a joint effort with Business Sweden. So we've been collaborating very much indeed to make this happen with Business Sweden. So it's just not us, and we don't have time. I'd just like to emphasize this. It's now my pleasure to introduce the next speaker here in Glasgow. It's Stuart Templer. He's Director of Global Sustainability at Volvo Cars. And he's primarily responsible for communications and engagement within Volvo Cars' global sustainability team. And Stuart has been driving the sustainability agenda across the company since he joined already in 2016. And this includes the development of Volvo's present strategy, focused on climate action and the circular economy, and also ethical and responsible business. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you here in Glasgow, Stuart Templer.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello, and first of all, thanks very much for We Don't Have Time for giving me the opportunity to speak on this important topic. I speak as a representative from Volvo Cars. To be clear, we are part of the problem of climate change. Road transport is currently responsible for around 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The latest IPCC report was rightly described as a code red for humanity. It should also be regarded as a code red for the automotive industry. We have a moral responsibility to quickly become part of the solution. There is no time for further delay, no time to delay in electrifying our fleets, and no time to delay in meeting science-based deadlines for the end of ICE sales, and no time to delay in decarbonising our business. The IEA and UN has made clear that there must be 100% zero tailpipe emission vehicle sales in leading markets by 2035 and globally by 2040. Volvo Cars is planning to be a fully electric car company by 2030. In all regions without conditions. By 2025, we're aiming for 50% of our global sales to be fully electric, the rest hybrids. This is one of the most ambitious strategies within the established industry. And we're transforming now. Already, over 25% of our global sales are electrified products, 40% in Europe alone. We're phasing out the internal combustion engine, a technology of the past. Earlier today, our CEO signed the Glasgow Declaration on zero-emission vehicles, underlining our support for the 2035 and 2040 targets. We were one of 6 auto manufacturers to support the declaration. We hope that in the months and years to come, there will be many more agreeing to the declaration. However, electrification alone is not enough. It is not the silver bullet to addressing the automotive industry's climate impact. Like the rest of big business, the automotive industry needs to tackle emissions across our value chains. Our own life cycle analysis of our C40 fully electric vehicle revealed that production emissions are 70% higher than for an equivalent petrol-powered vehicle. This is mainly due to the carbon intensity of batteries and steel, which is why we're working with SSAB to develop fossil-free steel for use in the automotive industry, and with Northvolt to produce batteries using 100% renewable energy. Collaboration is key in the race to zero. We need the support of our business partners. And we have the talent. Our industry has thousands of brilliant engineers who over the years who can drive down emissions using the same innovation with which they've increased horsepower over the years. Overall, as part of Volvo's SBTi-approved climate plan, we plan to reduce life cycle emissions by 40% by 2025, on our way to climate neutrality by 2040. And we're making some good progress with a 6% reduction in life cycle emissions so far, mainly driven by the electrification of our fleet. In our own operations, our global plants are already powered by over 90% climate neutral electricity. We're embracing the circular economy. For example, remanufacturing an increasing number of parts and minimizing waste far more than we used to. In 2020, we recycled 95% of our production waste, avoiding the generation of over 640,000 tons of CO2. However, we need to do much more and bring greater focus to our efforts, which is why today we announced we'll be introducing an internal carbon price of 1,000 Swedish crowns per tonne of CO2, almost double the recommended IEA level. This will influence product development and sourcing decisions and ensure we reach our 2025 goal. Climate action also makes business sense. In short, cleaner business is simply great business. I mentioned earlier sales of our recharged electrified vehicles. These have doubled in the last 12 months. This growth underpinned our record first half-year results earlier this year. Consumers want more sustainable products. Secondly, the investor community is increasingly focusing their investments in companies that are decarbonising. The financial risks of climate change are becoming a clear and present danger to them. We have first-hand experience of this. Last year, we issued our first 500 million euro green bond focused entirely on the production and development of our fully electric vehicles. It was oversubscribed 5 times. Last month, we also had a successful IPO, becoming a listed company. The rapid pace of our electrification was no doubt a major factor in this. Automotive companies that hang on to internal combustion engine technology, or indeed fossil fuel related production or technology in any other industry, will slowly be starved of investment, the lifeblood of any business. Those who don't transform quick enough are in danger of becoming 21st century Kodaks. In my industry, as in many others, decarbonisation has traditionally been regarded as a business burden. It is now business critical. So in summary, as well as being a moral responsibility, climate action now is essential to the future success and ultimately survival of big business. And if that's not an incentive for us, I don't know what is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. We will now be turning to our hub in Nairobi, so I might like to ask you to come back on stage.
Okay.
We'll see
Yeah.
what questions or comments we get from our hub in Nairobi. And in Nairobi, we are coming in from the Mount Kenya University, and we have with us our hub moderator, Dr. Robert Ngumbe Josephine. So let's see if we can connect. Yes, there you are, Robert. So Robert, what questions or comments do you have for us from your hub in Kenya?
Hi, Katerina. How are you doing? We are in Glasgow.
I'm good, thank you, Robert. Thank you. How
All
are
right,
you?
thank you very much. You've also been very keen following on the very enlightening discussions and the keynote speeches. But I wanted to quickly just pass the mic to two young people here who had questions. We'll start with Timothy. Timothy, you can quickly ask your question and then followed up by Geoffrey. Geoffrey, come here.
So yeah, thank you. My question is, as you're having this conversation on pioneering fossil-free solutions, we as Kenya, we are having it at a point where we just discovered oil in Turkana. So my question goes, how do we, which has attracted a lot of interest from people, so how do we strike a balance between meeting the interest of these people and trying to go the fossil-free solution? Thank you.
Thank you. Stuart, would you like to join me? This is a tricky question. How do we strike the balance between the necessity of making an income in a district where they just found oil and the necessity of reducing all fossil fuels? This is a tricky question, but you have long experience.
What was the question, sorry?
How do we strike the balance? The gentleman here, the young man, just mentioned that there is a district of Kenya that they found oil recently, and how do we strike a balance of having these people earn a livelihood and keep transforming, scaling down on fossil fuels? This is a huge question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about how we have a sort of responsible transition to renewable energy, to clean energy. And I think, obviously, in some parts of the world, that transition will be slower than in other parts of the world. But I, absolutely respect the fact that currently in some parts of the world, the fossil fuel industry is still a major employer. But I think that, President Biden's made this very clear in the US with his, $1 trillion clean energy plan, that the transition to clean energy is good for jobs, it's good for growth, and it will potentially create more jobs than there are currently and growth and wealth than there are currently in the fossil fuel industry.
Thank you, Stuart. And if we get rid of the subsidies, of course, it will make a huge difference all over the world globally. Yeah. Well, thank you. You might want to stay on because we'll see who the next question that is directed to. I think it was from Geoffrey.
Yes,
right?
From Geoffrey,
Hello, Geoffrey.
the ambassador for We Do Not Have Time.
So my question is, the current discussion on mobility largely focuses on the potential on the mobility potential around electric vehicles and autonomous vehicle. We know for sure they have a potential to reduce the fossil fuel emission, but still they have this car-centric vision that doesn't address adverse consequences like air pollution, noise. And so my question, how will it now be effective in terms of ensuring that that is addressed going forward?
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. Would you like to answer that one too?
If you can repeat the question,
yes.
I can't hear it.
It's a little bit tricky with the sound, the audio here from Kenya. So if you can condense your question and repeat it a little bit higher, Geoffrey, I think that's going to be. Yes, of course, headphones. But even so, Geoffrey, please condense it and speak a little bit louder because the transmission is not great.
Okay,
so the end of your question, or the question, please.
Yeah, so my question is basically, mobility focuses largely on innovation, technologies and creative to ensure that we achieve a better logistics in terms of in transport industry. But you see, still with these kind of innovation, we still have gaps in ensuring that noise and traffic is addressed in this sector. So my question would be, how will mobility ensure it addresses such significant problems in mobility? Yeah.
Excellent. Now we heard you, Geoffrey.
I think that's a really good question. I think, you know, I spoke about in my presentation about my speech about the climate impact of the automotive industry and of the transport industry, but there's also, you know, public health issues. I mean, the WHO have declared urban air pollution as a global public health emergency. 91% of people living in urban areas breathe polluted air. And so I think when you move to zero emission tailpipe vehicles, be that passenger vehicles, be that buses, be that sort of heavy goods vehicles, you will remove the majority of those emissions, particularly specifically from the tailpipe. So I think there are significant public health benefits of the transition to zero emission tailpipe mobility to more sustainable mobility that will relieve some of the problems that you refer to. Moreover, you know, you see cities that are banning vehicles, increasing number of cities that are banning fossil fuel powered vehicles as well, and that will only increase. The regulation will tighten. So hopefully, as more and more governments and cities get on board with that, with that sort of agenda, then hopefully the conditions in these cities and towns will be better and make them more livable and more pleasant places to live.
Well, thank you very much, Stuart Templer, and thank you very much from our hub in Mount Kenya University in Kenya. So thanks a lot for your questions, and take care for now.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we now move to the next segment. We're going to talk more about disruptors. Thank you so much for handling the questions.
Great, so we're now moving to the section called Disruptors. My name is Nick Nuttall. I've taken over now from Katarina. And I'd like to welcome our first speaker, a keynote speaker, which is Frederica Claren, who's Head of Sustainability at Polestar, a new entrant, in a sense, into the electric car story. Frederica has held sustainability positions over the past decade at IKEA and Swedish fashion retailer Cap Ahl. Frederica joined Polestar in April 2020 to drive the company's sustainability ambitions forward on issues such as climate neutrality, circularity, transparency, and inclusion. Frederica is chair of the board for Agenda 2030 West, an organization enabling partnerships between academia, business, civil society, and the public sector for the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Frederica, come on down. Welcome to the stage. Have we a microphone for our wonderful new guest? Thanks, Victor.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone.
I'll just take the dinosaur away, shall I? Because you're not a dinosaur. This is the fossil fuel subsidies, actually.
Okay, wow.
Yep, okay.
Now I get why I was there. Okay. So good evening, everyone, and thank you, Business Sweden, and We Don't Have Time for letting us tell our story. Polestar is still a young company, founded in a very significant time, a time when science clearly shows that we are in a rampant climate crisis, face multiple environmental challenges, and growing inequality on a global scale, and that businesses need to fundamentally change to play their part in overcoming these challenges. And at Polestar, we are doing our best to use our three core strengths, design, technology, and sustainability, to maximize the promise of electric vehicles. They are a climate solution we need to implement now. And they offer us a route to climate neutral and circular mobility in a way that fossil fuel cars never could. Already today, you can more than half the greenhouse gas emissions if you choose an electric car instead of a petrol one. And we are in quite a unique position in the automotive industry compared to others. We actually have a feasible, scalable climate solution. The electric transformation has begun, and everyone is talking about how we can accelerate the development. The question is now, how fast do we need to accelerate to show up in time for the climate crisis, for the world and everyone working in our industry? And how do we use this window of opportunity to go for full decarbonization and circular inclusive mobility? It will take a massive mind shift and the courage to redirect our efforts and resources into this new technology. And Transportation Day has been one of hopeful commitments, but also commitments that are simply not enough. And worst case, the lack of attendance from major industry players. Regardless, we are continuing to build the climate echo chamber, saying that we are doing enough. And here in the Swedish Pavilion, it's easy to get the impression everyone is trying hard and we are doing what it takes. The hard truth is we can and must do more. As an industry, we are not even close to taking the action needed. The large-scale, massive transition to electric cars needs to happen on major markets within this decade. The outlook now is, when considering the lifetime of a car, that they will still be driving and polluting in 2050 and beyond. When car companies keep investing in legacy technology, they are deliberately delaying one of the most powerful climate protection solutions available to us. We are the ones who should redraw our strategies, set braver goals, and send clear signals to consumers, policymakers, and our co-workers. At Polestar, we have decided to embrace full transparency to get the consumers on board in this transition and to show true accountability. We need to be honest about the real climate impact of electric vehicles. Going electric is only the starting point, not the end game. That is why we have set a moonshot goal for ourselves to create a truly climate neutral car by 2030, and we call it the Polestar Zero project. We will make this vehicle come true by reducing emissions throughout the supply chain and the entire production without turning to offsetting. And we will test and implement the solutions on all of our current and coming cars leading up to Polestar Zero. This is an unprecedented and complex challenge, to say the least. A car consists of some 30,000 components and relies on layers of suppliers and sub-suppliers. And this project finds the gaps in what is currently ongoing in terms of climate innovation, activates our current partnerships and supply chains, and sets up new research and innovation programs where needed. Sometimes I get challenging questions about this. How can you set such an unrealistic goal, is one. Or what if you fail the Polestar Zero project and fail to deliver this car to the market? My answer to that is that to us at Polestar, this is a very logical positioning to prepare for the exponential tech and behavior development that we foresee. And that this is the only way that we can realistically meet the 1.5 degree target. And finally, that we will have failed as an industry if we cannot put one climate neutral car model on the market by 2030. It is so much bigger than Polestar and this specific project. And that is why we will continue to be outspoken about our commitments to find scalable innovations and to make everyone from suppliers and policymakers to industry colleagues and researchers engaged and activated. And there is no way around this. The time is now, and we are the ones.
Super. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Frederica. And one day I really hope to have a drive of one of these wonderful Polestar cars.
We can make that happen.
I know you've been trying to make it happen. I've been kind of like getting scared and turning it down. So I'll have to get more concentrated on the possibility of driving a Polestar car and And it's a long conversation. You don't want to know about this. It's a funny story too. Okay, so let me call on our other speakers. Please stay with us, Frederica.
Okay.
And let's have Di Richards, Director of External Affairs of Hitachi Energy. We need to give him a handheld microphone there. Di, come in as tight as you can on this side. And then we're also going to go over to Robert Falk, who is the CEO and founder of Emride. He's with us here somewhere. Anyway, it looks like New York, but it could be Stockholm. Where is it, Robert?
It's from our launch in the US last week.
Okay.
I'm in Stockholm right now.
Okay, fantastic. Right. I want to let everybody know this is going to be very tight because we're well behind our schedule. We need to speed up a little bit. We also have in the US Dr. Shweta Chakrabarti, our president of US operations, and we don't have time. Hi, Shweta. Okay, I want to kick off with a question that actually builds on what we just heard before, actually, from Kenya. There has to be some way, surely, of making sure they keep that fossil fuel in the ground. The governments here are talking about investments and money needed for developing countries to actually get on their journey to decarbonize their economies. They need assistance. So surely we need to somehow bring all this technology of storage, electrification, renewable energy to the people of Kenya, for example, so they don't need to burn the oil they found in northern Kenya in Turkana. Am I right or am I wrong?
You are very right. I think we all can
Frederica.
agree on that.
Okay. That's fine.
You wanted a short answer.
I think
Okay.
everybody else agrees that's jolly good. Okay, so we'll just leave it there. All right. So, okay, let's get back to Frederica first, the moonshot story. Okay. I'm told there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of suppliers in a brand's supply chain. Maybe tens of thousands.
Wow, that makes me scared.
Yeah,
I hope
think
it's
for
not tens of thousands.
Oh no, I'm told for the big ones it could be 100,000.
Yeah, maybe. Okay.
Well, even if it's only 6,000, how the devil do you get to them? Do you actually have to go, Frederica, with your team and inspect every single factory? How do you make sure they can deliver those carbon neutral parts for the moonshot that you're aiming for?
Well, that's an impossibility, of course. And that's why we need to, continue the old school way of trying to secure responsible sourcing through code of conduct and but also couple it with new technology like blockchain traceability to enable that we secure that all of these layers in the supply chain are actually contributing. We can secure data through the blockchain technology, hopefully, and we can also create this immutable system to secure that materials, minerals that we don't want to leak in from unverified sources can be controlled. So we've used blockchain technology to trace cobalt in Polestar 2. We did that in a joint pilot together with Volvo, and it was just an amazing learning. And now we are working hard to use this traceability scheme on other risk minerals, materials, and to also start extracting CO2 data from all of these layers of the supply chain in an efficient way. That is possible. Yeah.
Fantastic. So a lot of people hear about Blockstar in terms of a currency trading on the markets, but it actually has a use, and you've just described it, which is very good indeed.
And it's really important to say that this is not the energy guzzling blockchain that is built for mining, for example.
Yeah.
This is a private blockchain which doesn't need that type of energy use.
Good point.
Very important.
Thank you very much indeed. So Di, you're at Hitachi, you're Director of External Affairs. You've been with many, many companies. You've been with ABB, for example, both in the UK and internationally. And you joined Hitachi Energy in 2020, July, when it started. Tell us a little bit, Di. What is your role in this transportation transformation that we're all talking about here?
Okay, thanks, Nick. And I know you want to be brief, so let me just say two things. And perhaps the two sides of the coin illustrate the need for us to think holistically about how the energy system and the transport system need to work seamlessly in the future. So first of all, and it has to be renewable is really the message. There's no point electrifying our vehicles or powering them by hydrogen if the electricity that we use to charge EVs or to generate hydrogen comes from non-renewable sources. So that's the first piece. And to do that, we need a lot more generation of renewables, and we also need to make sure that we transmit it to the right places. So often an offshore wind farm is a long way from where you actually need the power, so we need to remember that we need to bring that power to the places that it's going to be consumed. We're the world leader in technology called high voltage direct current, so HVDC technology, really effective way of transmitting power with minimal losses across very, very long distances. And we need a lot more of that kind of technology to bring energy from remote generation, from it, be it solar, be it wind, but also to interconnect between grids in different countries so that we have more flexibility in the energy system and can move it to where the demand is at the time of day. So a flexible, smart energy network is something that we need more quickly and more of. Second point is then when you move into looking at the infrastructure for electric vehicle charging, we need to make sure that is there in time for the demand that will increase in terms of EVs. We do a lot of work in fleets and perhaps focus on fleet vehicles. You know, they are the biggest proportion of new sales at the moment. So a good place to start, to have an effective fleet operation, you need to make sure that you optimize the schedule of your vehicles and time that also with the needs of the energy system so that you're using as much power as you can when it's in low demand and might be cheaper. You can perhaps give power from those vehicles back into the grid at a time when the grid is busy. So smart charging is an important part, and also making sure that you utilize that infrastructure. So making use of it for as many hours of the day as you can makes it more investable. Perhaps two plugs for a couple of things that we're involved with. So the world's largest fleet charging trial is going on at the moment that Hitachi is leading with some partners. And we're getting huge amounts of data from that, a program called Optimize Prime, learning about how we can do that optimization. And 5 miles up the road is an electric bus depot, a Caledonian bus depot. Those of you that are live in Glasgow will have seen the shuttles that are running around, so the electric buses. They're being charged at that depot. If anybody wants to take a trip out there, you can learn a lot more about e-mobility. You can charge your vehicle if you've got your own, or you can get a bus out there to see what happens in the depot. And it's a real example of showing that the technology works today and is in place and in practice.
Yes. Very good indeed. Thank you very much. So now I'm going to go over Robert. Robert Falk is the CEO and founder of Enride, Swedish technology company, working on sustainable freight transportation. And you're very much working on self-driving freight solutions as well, Robert, because I remember you were one of our shows before. And many degrees, mechanical engineering, economics and finance and business. I'm not going to list the whole bio. But it's a good one. Robert, now I'm going to ask you a bit of a tough question here, because whenever I'm with the Swedish colleagues, it's all about electricity. But here at COP26, you may be interested to know, there's a lot of people talking about hydrogen.
Yeah.
So where is this going? I mean, is this a fight to the death, electricity versus hydrogen, or can the world have both? You're very much supporting the electricity side. Explain to me why. What is the benefit of electricity versus hydrogen?
No, it's first of all, it's not that I support either of them. Okay. It's the numbers that support one of them. So it's first of all, electric is here in existing technology. Hydrogen is not. And if you just look through the numbers, electricity is cheaper. So for me personally, it's not the question of pro or con. It's just a matter of if it exists or if it's a future dream, or if what's the number behind it, if it's here or if it's the future. I think hydrogen is a way for a lot of industries to postpone the change that we have been. Hydrogen has been the next big thing since the 20s. That's the 1920s.
Right.
So it's I don't think it's even a debate. I think it's just wishful thinking.
Right. Tell us where you are right now with your solutions. Tell us where you are with the self-driving trucks and everything.
We currently have the biggest fleet of electric vehicles and heavy vehicles in Europe. We're deploying several hundred electric vehicles during 2022. And with that, I think we will have the biggest world fleet of electric trucks. We were first to go on public road with autonomous electric. We currently deployed more electric trucks than their total OEMs in total. So we're right now done what we've done since the start. To say that something else is different is doable. And when we started back in 2016, there were no one saying either electric, everyone was saying hydrogen, and it will come in 2040. And I think that's why we started the company, was to tell a different story and also to challenge. I mean, the heavy freight industry is just as, is literally in the same position as the car industry was in 2006, 2007 somewhere, where they were literally saying no one wanted to buy electric cars, and then came Tesla and proved that that was not the case. Mm-hmm. And I think that the heavy freight industry is roughly 10 years behind.
Got you. I'm going to go over to Sweta in Washington. Sweta's not an electric truck manufacturing person, nor an electric car manufacturing person, or in the renewable energy sector, but she is a behavioral change person. I just wanted to ask a little bit, Sweta, in some countries like the USA, people will sit for miles in a car, whether it's electric or it's petrol, and trying to get them into, say, buses or into alternative forms of transport just to walk around can be pretty tricky. There has to be a space in this story for cycling, walking, buses, public transport. How do we change people's minds?
That's right, behavioral change, right?
Yeah.
So we have all these tools in our toolkit, and every tool has a role to play. So we definitely need the technology we've been talking about to be better disseminated, and we need to support the technologies that are in the pipeline. But the one thing we forget to talk about is tweaking messaging so we can actually see widespread behavioral change. If we can get those who are trusted to actually share to wider audiences that changing behaviors from using cars, or let's say picking up the use of electric cars and in the future hydrogen cars, and rather in addition to that, also walking more, using public transportation. That is one way to get widespread behavioral change. So we need to identify those trusted communicators that have those audiences so we can really activate them for real widespread change. That's one. And the second part of this is to make it easier for people to make better decisions, create a better choice landscape. We see this is happening inside of buildings. To fight obesity in the United States, we're making stairs more visible, giving them more color, making them seem more alluring to walk up the stairs to get to the second, third, 10th floor. We can do the same thing with public transportation. We can do the same thing with bike lanes. So let's provide a better choice landscape so people default to better decision making, and let's also communicate in a way that we know reaches audiences.
Great, thank you very much, Sweta. So we need public transport, we need walking, we need all these other things, but we need to decarbonize our transportation systems. We've heard from some people that are actually doing that in amazing ways. And now we have to move on to our next section because time is pressing and tempus fugit, which is about the only Latin I know, so you don't have to clap. Thank you very much indeed. We're now going to the second panel here. We're going to a second panel which is homing in on materials and a circular economy through the lens of waste and through the lens of textiles. I'd like to bring to the stage Jan Svard, who is head of engineering at Easy Mining. He's an expert in circular management of resources, and we're going to learn a little bit about what Easy Mining is doing with things like sludge and fly ash and all kinds of things that you never probably even thought about. And then we're also going to bring on Patrick Lundström, who's the CEO of RenewCell. Patrick Lundström leads a path-breaking textile-to-textile recycling business. We're going to hear more about that. This is, what is it? The company's award-winning product brand is called Circulose, which I think is probably a play on circular.
Well, yes.
And something to do with lows as well, but not lose. We don't want circular lose, we want circular win.
But viscose.
Okay, viscose, that's where it came from. All right, now I've got it. And finally, we also got Sveta Chakrabarti, our president of the US operations there. Sorry guys, this is so dashed and moving quickly, but we have to move it on. I'm going to ask Jan first. Easy mining, I mean, it always used to be easy mining, wasn't it? You just dig a hole or something and pull the stuff out. But now we have the environment to deal with. We have human rights in many developing countries to think about. We've got climate change, we've got all these other things. So you have a different vision of what is easy mining now, and it's on the surface, I think. Tell us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick. I just have to make one comment first, because actually the head of engineering in easy mining is my son, John Svärd.
Ah.
But it's, I get abuse from him if I don't say that.
Okay, we better be careful there. Exactly. We don't want our kids bashing us when we go around for dinner.
I'm the CEO, but still, easy mining, you know, we use what's commonly known as waste.
Yep.
So it could be ash, which contains phosphorus, which is a critical raw material. It can be flow of water with a lot of nitrogen in it, which you then can catch and use instead of producing it in very high intensive processes. Or it can be a salt, or that could use for agriculture, or even for food if that would be allowed, but still for industrial processes that you catch also from an ash. So we take what's commonly known as waste, and then we use it as a raw material. And usually it's actually much more efficient. If you take the case of our phosphorus ash, it's 8% or 9% of phosphorus in it. In a mine where they dig it out, you know, very energy intensive, it's maybe 2. The rest is then piled up in a big hill. You know, hills are usually bigger around the mines than the mine itself. And in it also contains, you know, not only pieces of phosphorus, of course, but it also contains fluorine and cadmium and sometimes even uranium.
Right.
So, of course, if you could use a recycled material, it's good for the environment, but it's also a huge greenhouse gas emission saving.
And let me just come back on one thing with you here as well, because I think people don't really understand quite how much there is above ground now that used to be once below ground. I mean, I've seen reports from the United Nations Environment Programme on things like metals. By one crazy report, it was almost like there were more metals above ground now than below ground.
Yeah.
And when you think of fertilizers and stuff, you know, you either dig it up from some island where there's a lot of bird poo and destroy the island, or you make it from fossil fuels. Now, if you can get it back from these waste streams, this is a circular economy benefiting the climate.
Yeah, so just take the example of nitrogen, which of course is not a finite material, you have it everywhere in the air, but still to make a fertilizer of it, you know, this industry has a turnover of $300 billion US.
Wow.
Nothing basically is recovered. It represents in its production, you know, it's the air and energy is the raw materials, so natural gas and air. And you take it down that way, and it represents about 2% of all greenhouse gas emissions. But then in the process, when it's lost again, a lot of it is lost as laughing gas, or NO,
which
N2O.
is one of the gases nobody ever thinks about, but it's in the Kyoto Protocol, the first emission reduction treaty.
And that's another 6-7% of emissions. And basically, nothing is caught today. So it's a big financial loss, and it's of course an enormous environmental loss. So it's a lot above ground.
Let's go to our new friend here from Patrick from RenewCell. Patrick, so you are doing something interesting in the textile area. I mean, people are now getting to grips, aren't they, with the sheer scale of what fashion is doing to our environment, doing to people's lives in the fashion industry in many developing countries. What is it that you're bringing to the table on this?
Well, the fashion industry is actually contributing to the carbon dioxide effect. It's actually more than transportation and air transportation combined. So the fashion industry has a huge impact on the environment. What we do at RenewCell is basically we take old clothes that have been worn out, that you can't use anymore, And we take that into our process, so your old jeans, my old jeans, and we shred it down, and then we make a new dissolving pulp out of that. And the dissolving pulp is then used for producing viscose fibers, and the viscose fibers are then being sold to viscose producers, to yarn spinners, and then to textile manufacturers, and then new clothes are being made. And then we can actually dress ourselves with a clear conscience. So that's what we bring to the table. The fashion industry today is a straight line value chain. We pump oil, we make polyesters, we make acrylates, elastanes and so forth, but we also agriculture cotton. And cotton might be nice to wear, but it's a horrible crop for the environment.
Yeah.
And
it's like 2,000 liters of water for a t-shirt, isn't it?
That's correct.
Crazy figures.
That's correct. About 10,000 liters for a pair of jeans.
Yeah.
So what we then do is that we create circularity into that straight line that's currently fashion.
I have to come back here on this because we had a circular economy show on We Don't Have Time back at our studios in Stockholm, and there was this amazing foundation, the Orr Foundation from America, a designer there who works in America but also works in Accra in Ghana, where apparently huge quantities of old clothes from Europe and the United States come from people that want to recycle them, right? And from people and fast fashion industry want to get rid of it. And there's all these people in the markets there trying to upscale this stuff. And they call it dead white men's clothes. Because when they first started getting these shipments, they were convinced that dead white men in Europe and America, that the people were dying. Because why would they be getting rid of all these clothes? The volume was so fast, they thought there was loads of people passing away in Europe and North America. And the fact is, in Accra, they're getting paid diddly shit, right, for what they're doing. They can't even deal with the volumes, and so most of it's 50% is incinerated. So charitable donations by us, thinking we're being cool, plus the fast fashion industry, are dumping in West Africa huge amounts of textiles that can't be upcycled on poor people that can't deal with the quantities, and it's incinerated there. I mean, that's got to be a scandal, and whatever you're doing in your work must be contributing to trying to avert that sort of problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we do is we use textiles, and especially cotton textiles, and we convert that into new textiles. So definitely we're trying to solve that problem, yes.
Sveta, fast fashion. How do we make fast fashion not so cool and recycled clothes, renting clothes, upside clothes more trendy?
So that's the question, right? Because we know fast fashion is contributing to carbon emissions, exactly how Patrick described. It's tremendously bad for the environment, but there's so much opportunity here if we are able to rent more clothing or wear clothing that has been sustainably produced, has been recycled, has been upcycled, like the shirt I'm wearing right here that Ingmar and others have been wearing through this broadcast. This shirt was designed with love by Stephanie Dillon, a founder of Citizen Tea. And it's really a way to showcase that you care about the environment by wearing fashion that has been produced in a really sustainable manner and activating, again, like I was saying before in my keynote, activating those trusted communicators. In this case, those that are in fashion, those that are in media, a Billie Eilish, somebody who is walking the runway, who is wearing a shirt like this in a New York Fashion Week. That's how we're going to see widespread behavioral change, making these types of recycled brands cool. So let's make fast fashion uncool. Let's make upcycled, recycled fashion and rented fashion very cool.
Good. Jan, we have to rush everybody here, but I just wanted to come back to Jan because I think it's not really fair because the fashion story is so easy to tell and so clear, I think, in terms of the stupidity of what we're doing. But the waste that you're dealing with, some of these, and I just put this in context, is it easy mining or is it rag and cells? But somebody is dealing with a mountain in Estonia, the legacy of the heating oil industry using oil shale, which is so huge that people ski down it in the winter. And there is this work going on with support, I think, from the European Union to dismantle this and transform it into a fantastic new resource. Just tell me something there.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can take this resource and do something called PCC, so precipitated carbon, which is part of carpets, it's part of a lot of industrial goods, and it becomes also very pure. And I really like what Renewcell is doing, just to give feedback there, because it's the same thought that we have. Because if you work with circular economy, you have something that is contaminated. You have to have a decontamination step, always, because otherwise, you just accumulate in every circle. It's going to get worse. So it has to be decontamination step, and that's of course why sometimes it's also more costly. But somebody needs to pay for that and handle that, and it needs to create the value. If it's fashion, maybe the customer pay for it, but of course if it's infrastructure, then also you need somebody else to come in and support that business. And you need to be allowed to sell it on the same terms, which is not always the case in industrial, is that legislation is totally based on linear economy today. And I heard it very obvious in many of our speeches here that it's been the businesses are much faster than the policymakers today. So really the policymakers needs to catch up and align the legislation with what's required from business.
Good. We're going to have to pause it there, but I would like you to all just stay on the show, because we're going to go and try and go to our hub in Stockholm for any comments. Are you with us, Stockholm? I always feel this is like the Eurovision Song Contest, doesn't it? Are you with us, Stockholm? What's the voting here? Were they good? Give them a 6 or a 7 or whatever.
Stockholm calling.
Hello, Stockholm.
Stockholm calling. Business Sweden, 12 points.
That's amazing. Anything else, David, you just want to reflect on briefly?
I have a question for Patrik Lundström, actually. It sounds wonderful to recycle old clothes into materials for making new. I wonder, are there any hard facts you can put on that? How does a pair of jeans made with your technology compare to a pair of normal jeans, as it were? Do you have any hard facts, or how do you...
Or soft facts, they may be more comfortable.
Yeah, sure.
They actually are more comfortable, a little bit softer. But if you take, for example, the use of water, if you take a pair of jeans, use approximately 10,000 liters of water, we use approximately 20. If you take land use of cotton, for example, we don't use any land. If you take then other aspects like the carbon that is actually emitted when you actually come with transportations, as well as agriculturing the cotton and so forth, we don't have any of that either. So if you compare it then to the cotton industry by a whole, Renewcell's products are actually giving 2 kilos negative of carbon dioxide equivalents, because we're also leaving the trees standing. So it actually is a carbon sink because of we're not cutting down trees. So it's actually carbon positive in that sense, that we don't emit any carbon, but negative 2 kilos. So there's a lot of aspects, and this is not us saying that. That is a report, life cycle analysis that was ordered by Stella McCartney and carried out by SES Global Systems. So, yeah, there's a lot of benefits, of course.
Super. Thanks, David, for your question. A very interesting answer. Let's now go to Nairobi in Kenya. Habari. I know it's late there, but and don't say to me, "Mimi nataka pombe baridi tafadhali." Where are we? Do we have a question, please, from the audience? Do we have a question from the audience?
Hi Nick, habari yetu iko mzuri sana. Tunafurahia kuwa na nyinyi. So we are doing very well, and we're very happy to be part of this conversation. So I wanted to pass the mic over to Rukia. Rukia had a question to the panelists Rukia, please quickly ask.
Okay, we can just take one question, guys. Yeah. Fire away.
My question is, we have this. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you beautifully. I can hear you.
Regarding our topic of today, pioneering free fossil solutions, we have, and as highlighted by the panelists, we have seen that the issue is revolving around solutions such as great inventions. For example, we have the hydrogen cars, but the challenge we have globally is that these inventions don't have market. Their market is slow. So how can we scale the market to these inventions so that they are useful for their purpose? Thank you.
And maybe the question is, how can we make sure these innovations also scale up in the developing countries like Kenya, that you get these things quickly rather than having to wait 100 years, right?
Yes, yes.
So tell us, maybe a good answer here on this one, chaps. How do we get what you're doing by recycling all these wastes that are above ground back into something productive and create good green jobs? How do we do the same with the textile business? Because I know Kenya as well, and the markets are full of fast fashion, right, guys? I mean, there's so much of it coming from overseas. Okay.
Now, if you take our nitrogen solution, I don't really know about Kenya, but we had a meeting here this week with Sri Lanka, who has created something that the Colombo solution. So they have problems with nitrogen emissions. Mm-hmm. So of course this is a global problem, mm-hmm. and many countries are trying to attack this. So it's a globally applied technologies, of course.
But I mean, there's a lot of wastewater in Kenya,
sure.
right? A lot of wastewater going out to the sea. That wastewater is full of nitrogen and phosphorus, right, which can be used as fertilizer on the land instead of farmers buying that fertilizer from the fossil fuel industry. So I would say, Jan, that you have a possibility in Kenya of coming with these kinds of technologies and really turning it around in terms of costs.
I'm absolutely sure.
Yeah. Fashion, textiles.
Sure. I mean, textiles and collection of textiles needs to happen all over the world, and it's not only in Asia, but it's also in the Americas as well as in Africa. And eventually we have to have recycling plants in all continents, because you need to be close to the raw materials. And here we need to also have that in Africa and as well as in other parts of the world. Circularity is actually about creating upscaled materials in the vicinity of the source of the, let's say, the textile waste.
Right, got you, exactly. So we need to transfer these kinds of technologies rapidly into Africa. Guys, Nairobi, I'm really sorry about this, but we're so far behind time that we just have to end it there. I'm so sorry, but we're running late. That's why we...
Thank you very much, Nick, for checking in with us. Thank you.
No, we really appreciate that. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you, thank you.
It's very important. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. Thank you to Sveta in Washington as well, and our other speakers. We're now coming out of the disruptors into what we call behavioral change, which is very broad. We just need a little bit of a graphic emerging on the screen, perhaps. Yes, there it goes. So we call this behavioral change, but quite frankly, it's a very broad topic. It's about how do you get people to do things that they really should be doing. And I've got, with great pleasure, Johan Falk with me here, who's co-founder and head of the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. And if you don't know anything about the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, you need to look it up right now on the internet. 36 solutions to basically halve emissions by 2030. Johan, thank you very much. Please make your speech.
Thank you, Nick. About 3 years ago, we asked ourselves, what does it take for a company to be in line with the 1.5 ambition? And we realized that we need a business playbook, and a playbook which is based on science. It needs to be sharp, and it needs to be about absolute simplicity. So simple that even a CEO can understand it and read it. And also, it shouldn't be just about cutting emissions, it should be about creating a competitive advantage. So we kicked off this project and we launched the first playbook at the World Economic Forum last year. And the playbook is now the sort of foundation which all members commit to when they join the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. So where does it start? Well, it starts with aligning with science. We all know that we need to halve emissions every decade, and the first halving is the most important by 2030. So if we translate that to company, it means practically, well, halving your own emissions before 2030 towards net zero before 2050, but also your value chain emissions. But you also need to integrate climate in your strategy and contribute to climate action in society. And of course, report your progress on an annual basis. So that is the starting point. And the playbook is built on what we call the 4-pillar framework. And to be competitive, a company should have a strategy which spans over all these 4 pillars. And the playbook describes concrete actions companies should take under each pillar. Starting with the first pillar, I will give you a few examples. The first is about your own emissions, halving down your own emissions. And that is about energy efficiency, it's about cooling and heating efficiency, space efficiency, moving to electrical vehicles, going to low carbon business traveling, and 100% renewable energy. For a lot of companies, this may represent a small part of their emissions. We're talking about scope 1 and 2 emissions, but it's about keeping your own house in order. So it's absolutely essential. The second pillar is the value chain emissions. So what you need to succeed there, you need to ask your suppliers to halve emissions by 2030, and you need to support them, you need to work together with them. You need to switch to low carbon material, transportation, cloud services, upstream, but you need to work downstream, moving to circular business models. You need to ensure that your products run on renewable energy to succeed. But it's very concrete, but it's not trivial. It requires radical collaboration to succeed. This is incredibly important, the first and second pillar, but I would say this will become a baseline for all companies to make your business align with the future or future-proof. The key will be the third pillar, because the third pillar is about shifting your business to become a climate solutions company. So you need to ensure that your value proposition, your product, business portfolio is aligned with the 1.5 ambition. And you need to ensure that climate and nature is integrated as a purpose, in your purpose as a company. This will be a prerequisite for companies to grow or even survive in the long term. Finally, the fourth pillar. As a company, it doesn't matter if you succeed, if all other companies or other actors fail around you, because we are all in the same boat. So therefore, you need to contribute to society. And what does it mean practically? Well, companies need to ensure that their policy influencing is aligned with the 1.5 ambition. It supports the 1.5 ambition. And we expect companies also to invest in protecting and restoring nature, but do not call it offset, because it's not an offset. It comes on top of implementing the carbon law. And then, of course, supporting actors, your employees, and other stakeholders to take climate action. So we now built an ecosystem representing $800 billion in revenue per year, which is backing the playbook. Also, the UN Race to Zero is backing it. We plan to scale it to millions of companies and continuously update it. We welcome everyone to use it, to download it, to help us scale it and to contribute to it as well. To succeed, this is sort of our contribution to the Race to Zero, one of our contributions. And in particularly, we like to make the Race to Zero also a race to the top, which is absolutely essential. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Johan.
Thank you.
And just to say that Johan and the Exponential Roadmap, they are, well, partners with We Don't Have Time, indeed. And we're very delighted to have you here. Thank you very much indeed. We have to move on to a short pre-recorded interview with Thomas Schalit, who's founder and CPO at Climate View. So I'm here with Thomas Schalit, who is Chief Product Officer at Climate View. That's a Swedish software company working with cities. So let me ask you, Thomas, straight away, why are you here at COP26?
We are here to talk about Climate View and tell cities how they can use our software to plan, manage and execute their climate transition.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about Climate View itself. How exactly does it work?
Well, let's start with cities today declaring climate emergency, because we have quite a few of them. So they'll say climate emergency, we want to reach net zero by so and so. Then suddenly in front of them they have quite a big project to handle, probably the biggest project in that city's history. So what we do with our software is help the cities to understand where they are just now, their current baseline, what the operations that drive their mission, understand the pathways they need to take to reach within the Paris allotment, within their carbon budget, and what actions they can take to get there, and maybe most importantly, what this will cost and what are the co-benefits of this transition. So basically taking them a piece of software that takes them through the entire journey of where we are, where we need to go, and how to get there, and collaborate with stakeholders to do all this together.
So it's an interesting window that you just opened there, because of cities being happy to share data with each other. This software must be learning, in a sense, more and more and more of what cities can do. So in fact, they're all helping each other, directly or indirectly, to even higher possibilities as time goes on.
Spot on. That is the essence of what we're trying to do. We're talking about collaborative intelligence, and just that is the essence, because every new action that is put there, they can't be copied directly, but the patterns between cities are there. Also, when it comes to collecting the data, understanding the current situation of a city. All cities are not equal, but cities with similar patterns, with similar factors, will have quite similar baselines. So all this feeds into a constant learning of the platform.
That's amazing. So if we had all the 190 plus governments who are here negotiating at COP26 in Glasgow, we had them lined up in front of you, would you have one simple, straightforward ask for them?
A clear trajectory of a carbon tax.
Right.
So a pathway of the carbon tax.
So that would actually create a more level playing field, actually encourage those non-polluting actions that we definitely need for a safe future.
Yes, it would create a level play field, but also when we start having that in place, then we can start adjusting the trajectory and we can start accelerating things.
Thank you very much indeed for being with us here in the Swedish Pavilion, and best of luck with your work.
My pleasure, thank you.
So we've now come to the end of behavioural change. In fact, we've come to the end almost of the show. But we have one final beautiful moment. And to sum up this broadcast, I'm going to invite Frederick Fexer, who is the Executive Vice President, Region Sweden at Business Sweden, to join us, and Ingmar Rentzhog, the founder and CEO of We Didn't Have Time. And I'm going to hand the show over to you.
To me?
Yes.
Okay, are we not paying overtime?
No.
That's how it is to have an organization called We Don't Have Time. I would like to start to say thank you very much to Business Sweden for doing this together with us. It makes me very proud to be Swedish, actually. What an amazing lineup of speakers and climate action. And what gave me so much hope was how honest and open all of our speakers also have acknowledged that they are part of the problem, but they know it and they are working very hard of solving it. This was not the case on last COP. It had happened so much when it came to how the business community are starting to actually become activists in one way. Because it's not just about companies working on solutions like electric cars and stuff like that and circularity, emission cutting. It's also big CEOs talking about that we must end those subsidies. It's also big CEOs talking about that we must put a price on carbon. This is what I've been doing more like an activist, and here I am with the largest trade organization in Sweden talking the same speak. And what I think is the most important thing with this climate meeting, the COP26, is probably that we're not going to see this political breakthrough. We will see progress, but not the breakthrough needed. But what we see here right now, is the progress and the breakthrough in the finance and business sector. And that will drive change so that next COP meeting will have the political progress we also need. So this is definitely giving me a lot of hope. So that was my end reflection of today.
Well, thank you very much. It's a true pleasure to do this with you. And I see that you don't have the earphones on, so I'll also take off my earphones. I would like to give you this for our collaboration.
Thank you.
It's a true pleasure to work with you in this.
No one has given me this before.
It is to you personally and your team and the whole organization. It's a true pleasure to work with you. No, I share your view. I share your reflection on how strong the industry is now, and how strong the business is, and how strong the technology is in making the 1.5 alive, to keep it alive. And as we see that industry and technology, smart climate technologies, will stand for, or at least we count, that it will stand for more than 50% of the carbon dioxide reductions to 2050. And we see how the industry is ready to do that. Now, this will require innovation. It will require hope. We learned this here today as well. It will require some business acumen and lots of guts as well. And we see individual guts, but also company guts and also policy-making guts. And I'm happy to see that we have some of the sharpest and the smartest and fastest moving companies here today with us in pioneering the possible to keep the 1.5 alive. I have a few reflections. Is it okay if I take those? I've been listening throughout the whole session. It's been really, really interesting. I mean, the first one is how clear it is that technology will make a difference. I mean, we've been listening today to front runners and to leaders in green energy storage. I mean, that's one of the largest challenges that we have, and one of the largest hopes and possibilities that we have. Green transportation. Here we see that the emissions could be cut by 90% in the transport system if we go green. Green steel production, definitely the same thing. We can see how we can cut emissions giantly in that supply chain, and also new and recycled materials. So we have large chunks of what needs to be done in those value chains, and that's really clear to me. Many of the solutions are already here, and sometimes we speak about the chicken and the egg. Now the chicken is already here, so let's get going to get the egg laid. Second reflection, I'll speed up a little bit. how important it is to get the policy making, to get a level the playing field. We have to bring the risk down to make the investments, and it's not easy from a company perspective to make an investment, especially not now, because you have to make investments that you're not really sure if the other ones are doing the same and if the whole value chain will go along. So there's a lot of risk and instability or insecurity in making those investments. So that's one of the importances of a good outcome from COP26 here today. We need the Paris Rulebook with a robust set of rules, Article 6, high standards. We need the climate financing, as we also learned from your hub office in Kenya as well. I think those aspects are really important. And we're happy to see in the draft agreement that it looks like the targets on removal of subsidies is perhaps, we hope, will come alive. So that's really good. Third reflection, collaboration. No single government will make this alone. No single company will make this alone. We will have to see, as we see, we are collaborating along the value chains, and we will have to see that happening much more in the future. And if you do that, you have to collaborate upstream, downstream, side stream, and with your competitors, your worst competitors. They're your best friends now. So perhaps it's not collaboration, perhaps, and you have to compete with them as well. Perhaps it's more like collaboration. It's a concept, or you have to change your mindset to see that you have to compete with the ones that you perhaps love the most in making the transition possible. We see in Sweden, we see how Volvo and Scania are competing, but also collaborating around the most important issues to get to the next level. Fourth reflection, time. We're running out of time. Every fraction of a degree count. And companies are fast movers. That's what we learned here today as well. We see how fast the companies can actually progress. And I think now the question is, as we also pointed out here, how fast can the global policymakers move? The industry, I mean, if we get the global policymakers to set the targets, set the rules, and level the playing fields, the companies will run, and the industry will run. So that was my 4 reflections. It's technology, policy making, and collaboration or collaboration, and time.
I agree with all 4, but I have a 5th.
Yeah.
And that's actually something that I think more company business leader could do better. It's always nice if people can improve. And what I see is something that is often missing is the personal transformation. I think it's very important to live not as you preach, but to live the transformation. Because if you're going to lead halving the emission in 10 years, you get a so much better understanding on how to succeed and the challenges with that if you try to do it in your personal lifestyle. So I'm looking forward to having the whole Swedish delegation joining my train trip home.
Very, very, very good. Now we see that in preparing this and working with the companies, we see how they have asked questions exactly on that. How do we get there in the most carbon neutral way as possible? I have team members that took the train here, so I think that we see that they are changing. But I also appreciate what Mrs. Chakraborty pointed out. I mean, you have to take it down to the individual level, same thing as you are, and it's pretty difficult. It's about realizing how we need to change, and it's also I have to change. I have to change my behavior.
Yeah, and I don't think it's about to be trustworthy. It's about to experience it, so you learn from it. And if someone has, the ones that have took the train here, they understand that the train network in Europe is terrible.
Exactly.
So it's so much more to improve there, and there's a lot of business model that could be born like this. Why isn't it as easy to book a train ticket as a plane ticket? That's a great business.
And why can't they really answer what way to travel is the most carbon neutral way to travel? I mean, why is it difficult to get that? But we had a session today on charging infrastructure as well. I mean, if that would be built out, we could basically go with our EVs all the way in green energy.
Or the hydrogen car, as Mariestad did.
Exactly.
To yesterday's show.
Exactly. No, we and being a executive vice president at Business Sweden, I'm so happy to work with you and work with the industry, because we are determined that we can use or we could be a catalytic private public catalyst to make perhaps the most important change in human history together now. And we are a private and public entity, and we can push both the private side and the public side to make this happen.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
And thanks for watching.
Thank you very much. Take care.
There's a world